What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my watch list for Game Week 29. So I'm going to go through some of the players that I've got my eye on, starting off with Bruno Fernandes. Now, even though Man United have a double in 29, a lot of people are sceptical about bringing more of their players in. One, because Casemiro is missing through suspension, so he's not going to play in either of those games in 29 or Everton at home in Game Week 30. And that isn't a good thing for Man United, both from a defensive and an attacking point of view. So we will come back onto that later on. But also the fixture congestion is just not getting any easier. If I heard correctly on commentary yesterday, Man United have apparently played 25 matches since the Premier League restarted, when you take into account European matches, Carabao Cup and FA Cup as well. So that might start taking a toll on this squad, and it's not about to get any better over the next month or so either. So if we look at the fixture list after the international break, bearing in mind that some of these players are going to go away and play matches for their country as well. They've got Newcastle and Brentford on the 2nd and the 5th of April, so that is double Game Week 29. It's straight into Game Week 30 on the 8th, and then on the 13th, the Europa League starts back up again, and it's a match against Sevilla for the first leg of the quarter-final. So that Man United-Chelsea fixture in the bottom right corner, that will be postponed so that Man United can play in the FA Cup instead, but it still means from the 2nd of April to the 22nd, they've got 7 matches. They're continuing to play every 3 to 4 days. Now, I'm not particularly worried about Bruno Fernandes, because he basically plays every single game anyway. He's absolutely nailed. He usually gets 80 to 90 minutes, but it could impact the performances of the squad as a whole. So you have to weigh up whether that is going to impact them so much that Bruno Fernandes' points potential for FPL is just not going to be there, or whether you just take the positives that he's absolutely nailed on for a pretty good fixture run, especially if you're free hitting in Game Week 32. Now, part of the appeal for me for Man United players is not just 29, but also their fixtures in 30 and 31. I'm free hitting in 32, so that doesn't matter that they're not going to play. And then after that, they're going to have another 2 double game weeks, probably in 34 and 37. So with 9 game weeks remaining for Man United specifically, 3 of them are double game weeks, and some of the other fixtures include Everton, Forest, Wolves and Fulham. So that looks pretty good. But if you are someone that's unsure about Casemiro missing out and how they're going to play, the amount of fixtures they've got, you could just wait and see what happens in the Europa League, because you'll know whether Man United are through to the semi-finals before Game Week 33, and also whether they're still in the FA Cup as well. And obviously if they get knocked out of both those competitions, there's then less matches for the rest of the season, and they're just concentrating on the Premier League instead. Likewise, if they remain in those competitions, maybe you limit the amount of Man United players you go for. But for me, it just looks too good to miss out on, right? If you're not free hitting in 32, maybe you need to limit the amount of Man United players you go for. But if you are like me, it just looks great. You've got a double game week this week, Everton at home in 30, Nottingham Forest in 31. 32 doesn't matter because you're free hitting. Spurs away is probably the toughest game on paper, at least, that Man United have left if you discount the double game weeks. But even so, that one fixture compared to all the other pros to buying their players, it's just not enough to put me off. In 34, it'll probably be a double game week, so Aston Villa at home, and then one of the 2 games that needs to be rearranged. So it'll either be Chelsea at home along with Villa at home, or it'll be Brighton away. Then it's West Ham away and Wolves at home. And look, they're not brilliant fixtures. It's not like Bournemouth and Fulham at home or anything like that, but they're not bad either. And then in 37, you've got a double game week most likely that includes Bournemouth, and then one of those 2 fixtures that wasn't put into Game Week 34. And then you end the season with Fulham at home. So I feel like if things go well, you're buying a Man United player this week and you're essentially keeping them for the rest of the season. And I just don't see a huge amount of rotation in the Premier League, because United have to get Champions League next year, right? That's a must at this point. There's 2 ways to do that. You win the Europa League or you finish top 4. Now, Man United, by the bookies, because Arsenal are out, they will be favourites for the Europa League, but it's not a guarantee. They might even go out in the quarterfinals, so they have to get top 4 as well. And I think most people would agree at this stage, Man United are going to get top 4, and it's probably just that 4th spot between Spurs, Newcastle, Liverpool and Brighton, but it's still not an absolute given. And Ten Hag, as we've seen, doesn't rotate a huge amount. So I'm looking at with Fernandes that I get 3 double game weeks, lots of good single game week fixtures as well for a player that's absolutely nailed. And even though his goal threat is not great, he's got a lot of chances created, like his expected assists are 0.41 per 90 minutes, and he's on penalties as well. And even though his per 90 numbers are not great. He at least plays 90 minutes in most matches. So I can't really see too many reasons not to go for him outside of what I've already said. If you think that the amount of minutes this squad has played is going to start taking a toll. Now, just quickly on Casemiro, yes, it's not a good thing that he's going to miss out, but I just think, again, the amount of positives for buying Man United players right now for a double and Everton at home outweighs Casemiro missing out. I know people are worried about Bruno Fernandes playing deeper, for example, but I think on paper that has only happened from the start in one game against Southampton. It didn't go too well, so I wouldn't expect to see it a huge amount. And Sabitzer is back now as well. So against Fulham, obviously things changed during the match, but essentially Fernandes was the number 10, right? McTominay and Sabitzer started instead. Once they made a substitution and Anthony came on, Fernandes did drop back to the 6, and he was a lot deeper then, even though obviously he scored in the end, but part of that was because of a penalty, and the other goal was because Fulham were down to 9 men. So that wasn't ideal that for half an hour he played as a 6, but that is not necessarily going to happen in every single one of these games. So if you think it is, and you're worried about that, and you're not happy with the fixture congestion, the amount of minutes they've played, then maybe you ignore him. But for me, there are far too many positives to outweigh any of the negatives. So I'd be very surprised if Fernandes is fit and he's not in my team for game week 29. All right, let's talk about Isak next. And maybe I should have just listened to you all on the stream just after game week 27, where you said how good he looked against Wolves. And to be fair, he did look pretty great. Same as against Nottingham Forest in game week 28. And of course, you're going to catch the eye when you score 3 goals in 2 matches. So I am thinking about him, but a lot is going to depend on the double game week announcements. So hopefully before the game week 29 deadline, we'll find out about double game week 34 and possibly 37 as well. But there's also a fixture between Newcastle and Brighton to rearrange, and that could go into game week 31. Now, if that's going to happen, we should find out by the game week 29 deadline. But if it does, Newcastle and Brighton will have 5 fixtures over the next 3 game weeks. Now, I've already got 3 Brighton players in my team, but I only have 2 Newcastle. So they could have Man United at home, West Ham away in 29, Brentford away in 30, which I wouldn't really worry too much about having to play an attacker like Isak. Then in 31, it would be Aston Villa away and Brighton at home. And if we're looking on fixtures alone, if that does happen, Brighton's fixtures that week would be Chelsea away and Newcastle away. So fixture-wise, you would say Newcastle's are slightly better. So if you're looking at captaincy, maybe someone like Isak, if you thought he was going to play both games, is better than any of our Brighton players. Now, there are a couple of really good single game week fixtures that week as well. Kane has got Bournemouth at home. Harden has got Leicester at home. So it's not like we're stuck for captains. Even Man United have got Nottingham Forest away for like Rashford and Fernandes. But you know me, I'm going to look to captain a double game week player instead. And because the fixtures for Newcastle would be that Aston Villa away and the rearranged Brighton at home, then suddenly I'm looking at one of their attackers as a possible option. And it could be Isak. Now, my main concern isn't really how good he is, because he's brilliant. His underlying numbers are looking really good already. I think he's on 0.58 expected goals per 90 minutes. Now, that is over quite a small sample size this season, but historically his numbers have been good. So I would expect the goals to continue. It's just whether or not he'll get enough minutes. Now, obviously, what we've seen in the last few matches, it would be very difficult for Eddie Howe to leave him out. But Callum Wilson is always there. And when he is training, when he is fit and available, he is going to play some matches as well. It's not going to be a case, I would assume, going forward, that Wilson is just always sat on the bench. Now, they could both play. You could play Wilson as the 9, play Isak off him, and have one of kind of St. Maximin or Almiron in there as well. But even if Wilson doesn't start, you would expect him to come on more often than not, even if it doesn't always happen. So that's my only worry. It's all well and good on paper having 5 matches in 3 game weeks, but if Isak only starts 4 of them, then he's not necessarily better than any other players. I do like the price, the fact that he's less than 7 million, and there's obviously a quality player there. I'm sure Newcastle fans are really happy that they got him. It's just a slight worry over his minutes. So I think the thing to do with him is just wait over the international break to see if double game week 31 gets announced. If it does, then suddenly I'm going to want a third Newcastle player. But also what's going on with Wilson, because if Eddie Howe is still not quite sure about him, or he's not fully fit and stuff like that, then obviously that puts Isak's minutes right up, and we've already seen what he can do. The last thing I'll say about a Newcastle player, and I know we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, and obviously if I'm not sure if he's nailed on now, I'm definitely not sure if he's still going to be nailed on later on this season. But as someone that's already wildcarded, even when double game week 34 and 37 get announced, it's quite unlikely I'm going to be able to have 11 double game week players in those game weeks, because I'm not going to have a wild card to sort it out. I'm only going to have a certain amount of transfers. But Newcastle's single game week fixtures are pretty good. So I'm free hitting in 32 anyway, so it doesn't matter that they're playing Spurs at home. And to be honest, the way Spurs are defending, you wouldn't really care about having to play them there anyway. But I'm going to free hit, so I could remove him there. So essentially it could be double game week, Brentford away, possibly another double game week. If not, Aston Villa away is not a bad fixture. 33 is Everton away. And in 34, where of course I'm going to want to load up with as many double game weekers as possible, if I had to play Isak against Southampton at home, pretty good fixture. Arsenal at home in 35, a lot tougher. Leeds away, Leicester at home in 37. They're good as well. So if you're a Newcastle fan and you can tell me for sure that Isak is absolutely nailed on and going to start every single fixture when he's fit, then I'm very interested whether that double goes into 31 or not. If not, I'd really need that double confirmation just to be willing to kind of take that punt, because there are quite a few forwards right now that are looking good. Kane, Haaland, Watkins, Tony until he gets suspended. A lot of people have gone for Havertz. João Felix looks good. Solanke, he might not have as good underlying numbers, but he's absolutely nailed on and on penalties for only 5.5 million. There's quite a few players that I'm looking at, but I think I can happily knee-jerk and look at Isak, especially if that game goes into 31. So if you don't already own him, let me know in the comments below. Are you thinking about buying him this week? All right, let's talk about Luke Shaw, because I think if I'm going to bring in a defender this week, he's probably my number one target. Obviously, all the same stuff I spoke about with Bruno Fernandes applies here as well. So Casemiro being suspended for game weeks 29 and 30 is definitely not ideal. That is going to have some impact on Man United's ability to keep clean sheets. But I don't think it means it's impossible, right? I think sometimes we exaggerate how much of an impact a player missing out is going to have. So, of course, the clean sheet potential is higher with Casemiro in, but it's not just non-existent because he's missing out. So Newcastle away, Brentford at home, Everton at home, the next three matches that he's going to miss. Could Man United get one outside shot of 2 clean sheets in those games? It's still possible, even though it's less likely. But after that, he will be back. And obviously, we've got all those extra fixtures to come. I'm free hitting in 32 anyway, so that doesn't matter. So I really like the idea of bringing Luke Shaw in for game week 29. The only player I'd really consider instead is Reece James to go for a double up with Chilwell for the wing-backs, but also it would be a triple up on the defence because I've also got Kepa. I just don't like the idea of blocking that spot when I might want someone like João Felix or Havertz later on. And also, if you compare the fixtures, they're just a little bit more difficult for Chelsea, I would say. Like having to play Liverpool at home, don't get me wrong, if I've got Chilwell like I already do, or I've got Reece James, I'm not worried about having to play them in game week 29, but I'm not sure I want to go out of my way to bring them in. They got Brighton at home in 31, Arsenal away in 34, and they've only got one game to rearrange, which is going to be the Man United away fixture from 32. And if that goes into game week 37, that means their only double game week after 29 is Man City away and Man United away. So it's not even that good. And I think the fixtures outside of that are just slightly worse for Man United. And also, as much as we might have Luke Shaw down as this injury-prone player, he's played a lot of minutes this season and he's basically proved his fitness. Anyone can go and get an injury. I'm not saying that can't happen, but I don't think we should have Luke Shaw down as this injury-prone player because he has not been that this season, whereas Reece James has missed a lot of time. So I think I'd rather just have one Man United defender than get a third Chelsea instead. And also with Man United, I just feel like Shaw, Fernandes and Rashford for outfield players, they're just the obvious ones to get. Like Weghorst, you're probably not going to want to use a forward spot on. None of the other defenders are really either nailed on or that attacking. So Martinez is probably your next best option, but not that attacking. Varane maybe slightly more injury prone than especially Luke Shaw so far this season. And for the right back, you've got Wan-Bissaka or Dalot, and they are rotating quite a lot. So if you want a Man United defender, it kind of picks itself. So I really like Luke Shaw. I don't think there's any other defenders looking at my team that I'd really be massively worried about not having. The only one later on, at least, would be someone like Trent Alexander-Arnold, but he would probably have to come in for Ben Chilwell anyway. We're talking a lot later down the line, like possibly game week 34. So in the meantime, I think Luke Shaw is probably the number one player that I would be looking at. I can't think of any more. They've got a double game week this week, then also good fixtures, but also more double game weeks to come that I don't already own. So Luke Shaw, again, is probably someone I'm going to have to bring in, but it would be for someone like Gabriel, who doesn't have a double game week, but he does have Leeds at home. So there's a lot of thought required for that, but I do think getting to triple Man United, even without Casemiro Casemiro, with the game weeks they've got, the 3 double game weeks to come for the rest of the season, they're quite a high priority for me. So let me know if you think there's a better defender to bring in than Luke Shaw for this week. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll catch you again soon.